Hi guys, we're back with a really quick Facebook Live, just answering a few questions coming on from yesterday's. We've had loads and loads of comments, some really brilliant ones and loads of questions. Can't possibly get them all done in a really quick one. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to answer the main question that you've asked. And then next week, which I think is Sunday night, but I'm not 100% sure, I better ask the producer Sam. What we're going to do is we'll go through some of the more in-depth ones. So I'll go into next week about, again, more on flower making and also about how to make a quick background and some of the bits like that. I'll also be featuring in that. There is a new die I'm going to be launching on Thursday. Try and show you that at the end, but I'll be using that in this one. So what I'm going to do in this one is I'm going to go through the difference in inks. I had loads of people asking me this on this Facebook, and also whenever I'm going around the country or anywhere, people are always asking me what's the difference. So if you want to pan over here, Uncle Sam. They said Auntie Sam.
Auntie Sam, yeah, right.
What people usually tend to ask is, what is the difference between inks? So here I've got a distress ink, I've got a dye ink, and I've got a pigment ink. And I want to go through the difference between them. So what I'm going to go through first is you've got three main types of ink. This is all based on my opinion and what I know. So I would never stand here and say this is all fact. This is just the way that I see things. It's almost like the way John sees the craft world. So you've got three types of ink, and you've got distress ink, which is a water-based ink. You've got dye ink, which is almost like a water-based but with glue ink. Then you've got pigment ink, which uses a solid pigment colour and it uses more glycerin. So best to explain the difference. I'm going to pull these closer to me to start with. I've got three pieces of card. So this is your distress ink. And your distress ink is effectively colour and water. So it will give you a shabby, distressed look. It won't give you a solid square. It will give you something that's a little bit patchy. That's what Tim Holtz designed it to do. You then move on to dye ink. Now, dye ink is, again, water and colour, but this has glue or a binder in it. So if you can see, if I do the same three taps, using the dye ink, what we're getting is a solid, bright colour, and it gives us an even coating. That's because there's a little bit of glue in there. We then move on to pigment ink, and pigment ink is basically colour, there we go, water and a lot more glue. So effectively you can see the shine on that. That will stay wet. So that one will heat emboss. And if we compare the three colours, and I've chosen as close colours as I can, you can see we've got quite a palish version on the distress. We've got a bright but still translucent on the dye. And we've got a very flat colour on the pigment. So it's all well and good saying, oh, well, this is the colour and this is the difference. But I'll show you what I mean. So here, I'm going to stamp each one. So what I really should have done is prep a little bit more card. And please excuse us if the Facebook Live goes out. We are starting to have a massive thunderstorm here.
Yeah, just started tipping it down.
So it may be to do with that. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to pop in here. There we go. So just using my press to impress. And I'm going to use my Christmas rose stamp. And with the distress ink, this is designed to be distressy. So I'm going to ink up the stamp. And there's a lot of detail in this, so it may not be quite as obvious as I'd like. But if you can see, it's slightly shabby. It doesn't give us quite as much of a clear look. I'm just going to move it around a little bit. And I'm going to go with the dye ink. So we'll put that one in, take it off. Got a second coat, but we'll live. The dye ink sticks straight to the stamp. So give it a good press again. See, with the dye ink, we're brighter and then more detail showing. So you should actually be able to see more detail, more of the little dots. Whereas in the Distress, they're slightly more blurred and not quite as prominent. I'm going to spin the card round and we're going to go with the pigment ink. So I really should clean my stamp between, but I'm not going to. If you can see while I'm inking this stamp how much coverage the pigment ink gives, because this is a solid colour. So this isn't like the others translucent, this is opaque, which means that we can't see through it. So there I've got the brightest and the warmest of all of them. However, I'll take this out. You can see all the sheets, all the colours there. So we've got Distress, we've got dye, and we've got pigment. On the Distress, it's paler, and it's not quite as much detail, but effectively, you can see it starts to smudge. Because it's got the water and no glue in it, there's nothing to give me a crisp stamped image. On the dye ink, it should actually smudge less. These aren't completely dry yet, but you can see when I smudge it off slightly, I'm still seeing the design and the pattern. Give it a couple of minutes and that'll dry. On the pigment ink, this won't dry at all. So it's just still sticky. And no matter what I do, that will be sticky. So that's your difference for stamping. My preference for stamping clear, crisp, nice, translucent is using the dye-based ink. That's my preference. Move that out of the way. I'm then going to answer another question and use the same inks again. So, this time using the flower foam. This is the Craft Artist Moulding Foam, new white pack, 0.6mm. So let's just get these out right. So, the Distress ink. We're getting virtually nothing. And it will wipe through. The dye ink gives us a darker coverage and gives us that translucent look, so we're still seeing the white underneath. We can still see through. Hopefully you can still see my finger through. On the pigment ink, and I'll just get the door back. Oops. What we get there is a solid, bright colour coverage. So I won't see anything through. Very little through it. The dye-based ink, I can see through. And the Distress ink, virtually nothing. So, if you're wanting a light colour and you're wanting a very soft colour and shading on your foam, I would suggest using the dye ink. If you're wanting a solid bright colour or opaque, you want to use the pigment ink. Final test I'm going to show you is we're going to use now, this is the crystal flower making paper. So this has the mica in it, and this is what we'll be using in next week's Facebook Live. So with the Distress ink, I'm really having to scrub it on. You're still seeing the colour through, but it is quite patchy because it's designed to be like that. It's designed to be beautiful and shabby. If I then move on to the dye-based ink, clean piece, I'm getting an even covering and bright piece of colour. On the pigment ink, I'm getting a solid opaque colour. So I'm still seeing the mica, but nowhere near as much. So when using on the flower making paper, I would say the preference is to use the dye-based ink. Beautiful coverage, and it colours it perfectly. So very quick and almost dirty in a way, but I've not been that messy, which is unusual for me. Way to show you the difference between the three different types of ink. You'll find most products that I've found are a complete mix of these. So you can find things like oxides, which are a mix of a distress ink or a dye ink mixed with a pigment ink underneath. Loads of different things you can do with this. Again, I could go on and show you stamping them and die cutting them, but we'll be doing that through in the next class. And to answer one quick question that I had was about lining up my stamp and die plates. If you can see here, cut side of the die down, you've stamped these little corners. All you need to do is line up the die, making sure it's in the right shape, and match corner to corner. Once you've got the two corners matched, you can see there I've got the corner and the corner. There's no white showing anywhere. I simply tape that down to stop it moving and cut it. So I'll run that through just so you can see what I mean. Come on, Bruno, do your job.
So John, whilst that's going through, what is the difference between Versifying Clair and Archival?
I honestly don't know.
There we go.
So I couldn't actually tell you. I haven't tried the Versifying Clair. Archival ink is quite a nice solid dye ink. I do find it a little bit dry myself. I have got some Archival inks. Bear with me. Follow me this way, because I actually do know where things are, which is unusual. This is my ink storage. Nice and tidy, as you can see. Well, one of my ink storages, because there's another one there for my eyes inks. Oh, and there's another one there as well for my eyes.
There's quite a few.
There are quite a few. But I was first and foremost a stamper, so... This is an Archival in saffron. So the main difference is, you can see it actually says on it, it's waterproof, permanent and acid free ink. So this is something you're supposed to be able to do. This you can do all your watercolour techniques with. But if you see, because it's a felt pad, it's a dye-based quick drying ink. So it's not very easy for doing your techniques on, but it will mix quite well, and you can stamp over it and colour over it. So I don't know what the difference is between that and Versiclair. I haven't tried the Versiclair. Sorry, guys.
Thank you, John.
I didn't realise exactly how many inks I'd got. And that's just what's on show.
Yeah.
But if you can see here, what I've done, I'll take the plate out. We'll ignore the centres, but which are all cut. This is cutting out using the dye ink, which is my preference. And this is onto my new stamping card that we're hoping to bring soon. But you can just see, because it's dye ink, I've got all that level of detail. Everything's cut out right because I lined up the dye right, but I keep, even in the smallest petals, I keep all that level of detail. So that's why I have a preference for dye ink for nice clear stamping. Well done, John. Pull a petal off, we all do that. Anyone would think I was too heavy-handed, but hopefully you can see all the detail on that. And that's one of the reasons why I have a preference for the eyes inks and the eyes ink dyes, is basically because I get that clear, crisp, beautiful colour stamped image, correct every time with no blurring, and I do get a perfect impression from the pad, which just shows how much ink is in there and how juicy they are.
Someone's asked, they've seen a new dye.
Have they?
When are these ones coming out?
Thursday the 11th, I believe.
There we go.
You shouldn't have seen the... I thought I'd been careful in hiding things.
No.
No, well, I will give you a little sneak peek as I promised.
Right, where are you going?
So I'm going to go behind you. Here we go. Lost a die. And I will show you. This is new dye that's coming out along with a woodland scene on Thursday. And this will be available, I believe it starts on the 12 o'clock show. The 8 o'clock show is Find It, but it may be available online. This is the new Woodland Trees, which is the big version that Sam took the idea from for his star centres. So if you can see the Stam Stars die, it's a miniaturised version of that. So the idea being, of course, you could mat and layer, and that will fit in your new square scene box card. So in the square scene box that will fit in, and there's some... Shall I quickly get a card?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm taking far too longer than I said, but I will quickly pull a card.
Oh dear. What have you just dropped?
Everything.
Yay.
No idea where I put them. Oh, they're in the bottom.
Unless they're upstairs.
No, they're down here. I'm just being disorganised, as usual. With a lot of shows to do, I obviously have a lot of things prepped. Unless they are upstairs and hiding away. Oh, there we go.
They were in the first box.
Yes, of course they were. Sorry, that's not exciting. Let's switch round. Okay, so here's one. Made with lots of layers of it. And I have brought a second one because this is my favourite, and I'll be showing you this technique on the lunchtime show. And that's that one, where I've actually used it to do some stamping and die cutting as well. But hopefully that answers all the questions, or a couple of the questions. Really sorry I've not got more time. The weather is getting even worse here. We had a beautiful morning. But again, new Facebook Live next week, answering your questions. That's the idea of Live or Craft Cave Live, is we answer your questions. So keep them coming in. I've got the background for next time, but let me know what you want me to do and we'll try and plan it for the next one. Until then, enjoy.
Thank you, everyone.